There's no such thing as real silence in a Jeffries tube. It's a low thrum, the lifeblood of the ship pulsing all around you. It's the hum of the recycler turning yesterday's garbage into tomorrow's air. For 3 years, that thrum was my only constant companion. The ship, the CM-88 freighter Magpie, was my whole world, a tiny bubble of gravity and warmth adrift in an infinite cold dark. My name's Kale, and for all intents and purposes, I was the last man alive. At least, in my little corner of the universe. I was the ship's mechanic, its caretaker, its only occupant on a long, slow salvage run to the outer rim. My job was a grind. The same old routine. Check the fusion coils. Recalibrate the NAV sensors. Chase down the endless, rattling ghosts that live in the guts of any ship old enough to earn a name. On that cycle, the ghost was a power fluctuation in junction 7 gamma, deep in the ship's engineering underbelly. It's a cramped, greasy space that probably hadn't seen a human since the day it was built. I was wedged between a coolant line, sweating condensation, and a bundle of fiber optics as thick as my arm. The diagnostic pad chirped, telling me the fault was behind a primary access panel. Easy enough. I leveraged the pry bar, and the panel groaned, surrendering with a pop of sheared plastic clips. And that's when I saw it. It wasn't on any schematic I'd ever seen, and I knew the Magpie's blueprints better than the lines on my own hands. Flush against the inner wall, nestled in a web of wiring that looked completely alien to the ship's standard tech, was a button. It was a single, dark circle of some non-reflective material. No label, no warning, not even a scratch to hint at its purpose. It wasn't the standard issue red for emergencies or green for system activation. It was just black, a perfect void in the grimy metal landscape of the ship's guts. My first thought was it had to be a prank, a relic left by some old crewman with a weird sense of humor. But the wiring wasn't a joke. It snaked away from the button, bypassing the ship's main conduits and plunging deep into the core structure, towards systems I wasn't even supposed to know about. Every instinct, every year of training screamed at me. This was wrong. This did not belong here. My fingers hovered over it, a millimeter from its surface. The thrum of the ship around me suddenly felt like a hell breath. And in that quiet, a single, terrifying question bloomed in my mind. What happens when you press a button that no one ever wanted you to find? For the first few hours, I tried to pretend it didn't exist. I sealed the panel, filed a report as a resolved power fluctuation, and went back to my duties. But I couldn't get the image out of my head. That perfect black circle. The strange, organic-looking wiring. It was a splinter in the predictable, monotonous reality of my life. The Magpie was a junker, a salvage hauler passed through more corporate hands than a cheap credit chit. But she was mine now in a way. I was her crew. Captain, engineer, cook, and janitor, all rolled into one. My contract was simple. Keep the ship running, pick up the salvage, bring it back. The solitude was a feature, not a bug, a chance to escape a past I had no desire to revisit. The loneliness becomes a physical presence out here. It sits with me in a mess hall while I eat my nutrient paste. It watches over my shoulder on the bridge as I stare at the endless star fields. Sometimes, I talk to the ship, my voice echoing in the empty corridors. Just a bit of rattle today, old girl, I'd say, patting a wall. We'll get you sorted. The ship would groan back, a creak of stressed metal, a hiss of pneumatics. It was her little dialogue. But after finding the button, that dialogue started to change. The ship's familiar groans began to sound different, more deliberate. I found myself back in that Jeffries tube by evening, diagnostic pad in hand. I ran a deep system scan, tried to trace the strange wiring from the outside. The scanner couldn't make sense of it. The material of the wires didn't match anything in the ship's database. The energy signature it was putting out was passive, dormant, but it was there, a tiny trickle of power, humming at a frequency that was just on the edge of what you could hear. I pulled up the ship's complete schematics, the master files from the day she was commissioned. I cross-referenced every modification, every repair order, every captain's log entry that had been saved. Nothing. The button and its system were complete ghosts. An unauthorized, undocumented, and deeply unsettling addition to my home. That night, for the first time in years, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bunk, listening to the thrum of the ship. But now, underneath the familiar hum, I could swear I heard something else. A whisper. It was so faint I thought I was imagining it, a side effect of being tired. A single, sibilant sound, like sand falling on glass, right at the edge of my hearing. I sat bolt upright, the blood draining from my face. The comm system was off. The ship was sealed. There was no one else here. I told myself it was the ventilation system, the recycler, anything. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it wasn't. The sound had come from everywhere at once. I got out of bed and went to the small viewport in my quarters. The void outside was absolute. A star, a million miles away, glittered like a diamond on black velvet. For the first time, I felt like something was looking back, the next few cycles. I started to quietly lose my mind. The work continued. The ship still needed me, but my focus was shattered. Every creak of the hull, every flicker of a light panel, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. The button became an obsession. I find myself drawn back to that Jeffries tube, just staring at the sealed panel, knowing what was behind it. I felt like a character in some old ghost story, fixated on the one locked door in a sprawling, empty mansion. The strange phenomena began to escalate. It was subtle at first. A tool I'd left on a workbench in a machine shop would be on the floor when I got back. I chalked it up to a microgravity fluctuation, common enough on a ship this old. Then, I was on the bridge, running a course correction, and for a split second, the main view screen flickered. In place of the star field ahead, for less time than a blink, was an image. It was a place of soaring, crystalline structures under a bruised, purple sky. An alien city. It was gone before my mind could even process it, replaced by the familiar stars. I stumbled back from the console, my heart hammering against my ribs. The ship's diagnostic log showed no error, no momentary lapse in the feed. As far as the Magpie was concerned, it never happened. The whispers grew more frequent. They were no longer just a faint, sandy hiss. They started to take on a form, a cadence. It was a language, I was sure of it, but one that twisted the air. It sounds impossible for a human tongue to make. The noises seemed to slither through the vents, to coil in the dark corners of the cargo bay. I started wearing noise cancellation headphones, but it didn't help. The whispers weren't coming through my ears. They were resonating inside my skull. Paranoia became my shadow. I started sealing off sections of the ship I didn't need, telling myself I was conserving power. But really, I was making my world smaller, trying to build a fortress against the encroaching dread. I felt a presence with me, always just out of sight. A flicker of movement at the edge of my vision that vanished when I turned. A shadow in a corridor that was just a little too dark, a little too long. I was losing it. I knew I was. The isolation was finally taking its toll. That had to be it. But what if it wasn't? What if the ship wasn't empty? This thought, this terrifying possibility, drove me to do something I probably shouldn't have. Every commercial freighter has a deep archive, a sealed-off section of the ship's memory core that records everything. It's the ship's soul, and it's heavily encrypted for a reason. I was just a contract mechanic. I didn't have the clearance. But I was also the only one here. It took me the better part of the day to bypass the security. The system fought me, throwing up firewalls and encryption barriers that were way more robust than standard. Someone really didn't want anyone in here. When I finally broke through, I felt a surge of triumph, quickly followed by a wave of nausea. What was I about to find? I filtered the logs, searching for anything related to the ship's last registered crew, before she was put in dry dock and handed to me. The ship's name was the same, Magpie, but the crew manifest listed 12 souls. Captain Eva Rostova, and a chief engineer named Alara Vance. I started with Alara's personal logs. The first few entries were mundane, just like mine would have been. Complaints about the food, notes on a faulty sensor. Then the tone shifted. Log entry 74. We picked up something interesting today. Her voice was calm, professional. Standard salvage protocol. A derelict vessel. Colonial era. Registry name Erebus. No life signs, no power. But the long-range scans picked up a strange energy signature from the cargo hold. Captain Rostova wants to bring it aboard. I have reservations. The signature is unlike anything I've ever seen. I paused the log, my blood running cold. Erebus. The name sounded like a curse. I skipped forward. Alara's voice was different now. Strained, frightened. Log entry 81. It's been on board for a week. The artifact. It's just a shard of obsidian-like material, but it hums. The geeks in xenology can identify it. They say it absorbs light, that it's older than the ship, older than the colony it came from. Since it came aboard, things have been strange. People are on edge. I keep hearing things. A song. A high, thin music coming from the walls. My hands are shaking. A song. The whispers. Log entry 86. Her voice was a ragged whisper now, laced with static. The silence isn't empty anymore, Kale. Oh God, I just said your name. Who are you? The song, it shows you things. Glimpses. I saw a man, alone, fixing a conduit. You. It's not just in the walls. It's in my head. Rostova is smiling all the time now, this awful, placid smile, even when she's staring at a blank screen. Half the crew is confined to quarters, screaming about monsters in the shadows. It's the artifact. It's singing to us, and we're all learning the words. The pieces were slotting together, and the picture they made was one of absolute horror. The previous crew hadn't vanished. They hadn't been transferred. They had been consumed. Consumed by whatever they'd brought aboard from the Erebus. This song Ilara spoke of, it wasn't just a sound. It was a contagion of the mind. I dug deeper, my search now frantic. I found fragmented security footage from the cargo bay. The video was corrupted, flickering between static and distorted images. But I saw enough. I saw crew members standing motionless for hours, staring at the containment unit. I saw a man clawing at his own eyes, screaming without a sound as the video feed died. I saw Captain Rostova, her face illuminated by the view screen, that placid, terrible smile on her face as red alert lights flashed silently around her. Then I found Alara's final log. It wasn't a video, just corrupted audio. Her voice was barely recognizable, warped by static and a strange, harmonic resonance layered underneath her words. It sounded like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. Can't contain it, she rasped, the words broken by shuddering breaths. It's not a thing. It's a consciousness, a thought that wants a body. It's wearing them now, wearing their minds like clothes. They're all singing its song. Rostova, she showed me what we're becoming. We're not dying. We're changing. There was a long pause filled with that unearthly static. When she spoke again, her voice was low, urgent, a secret being passed across a chasm of time. I built something in the guts of a ship, a last resort, based on the patterns in the song, the energy it emits. It's a focal point, a way to reset, to stop the music. My heart stopped. The button. It's hidden, she continued, her voice fading. Behind the panel at 7 Gamma, an undocumented modification. They can't find it. They don't think like I do anymore. They just are. But listen to me. Listen. If you find this, if you are hearing this, don't listen to the song. Don't let it finish. It changes you. It remakes you in its own image. The button. Her voice broke, a sob catching her throat, followed by a sound that wasn't a sob. A wet, guttural clicking. The button, she whispered, her voice suddenly, unervingly calm, the resonance gone. It's not a reset. I was wrong. It's a release. A different kind of release. It doesn't stop the song. It gives the song a voice. The log ended. Not with a click or a cutoff, but with a sound that will haunt me until I die. It was a chord struck by a choir of inhuman voices, a sound of immense, cosmic power and profound, ancient sorrow. And in that chord, I could hear Alara's voice, no longer speaking but singing. I pushed away from the console, stumbling back into the corridor. The ship was no longer a collection of metal and wires. It was a tomb, a haunted house hurtling through the void. The entity from the Erebus wasn't gone. The salvage crew that found a magpie adrift and silent hadn't cleaned it out. They had just sealed the tomb. The entity was still here, dormant, sleeping. And I, in my loneliness, had started to wake it up. The whispers were clearer now. They weren't just formless sounds anymore. They were coalescing, and they were beginning to sound like me. Kale! They seemed to hiss from the air vents. Kale, we are here. We have been waiting. The button wasn't a weapon to destroy it. It wasn't a distress call. It was the final piece of a puzzle Alara had unknowingly completed. An amplifier. A conductor. A way to give the formless entity a focal point. A voice. I finally understood the real horror. The button wasn't meant for the old crew. They were already lost, their minds unspooled and rewoven into the entity's song. Alara had built it for the next person. She had built it for me. Whether as a warning or a trap, I didn't know. But its purpose was now terrifyingly clear. It was a choice between a lonely life and a shared existence. Between being a man and becoming a note in a monstrous, cosmic song. My mind, already frayed from the solitude, started to completely unravel. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. When I did drift off, my dreams were nightmares of alien geometries and that terrible, beautiful music. I'd wake up screaming, the phantom notes still echoing in my skull. I started seeing them. The old crew. It was never direct. I'd catch a glimpse of a woman in a captain's uniform, Rostova, standing at the far end of a corridor, her head tilted, that serene smile on her face, before she'd dissolve like smoke. I saw a man in an engineer's jumpsuit, Alara, flicker into existence by control panel, her hands moving over the controls, her face a mask of concentration before vanishing. They weren't ghosts. They were echoes. Memories imprinted on the very fabric of the ship, now playing back for an audience of one. The ship, my sanctuary, my only companion, turned on me. It was no longer passive. It was actively hostile. I was walking to the mess hall when the corridor lights ahead of me went out, one by one, plunging the passage into absolute darkness. I froze, and from the blackness ahead, I heard a soft giggle, the sound of a young girl. There were no children on the crew manifest. I turned and ran. Doors would jam, trapping me in a room for an hour before inexplicably sliding open again. The life support would vent a strange, sickly sweet gas for a few seconds, making my head spin before alarms would blare and the system would purge, reporting a sensor malfunction. There was no malfunction. The ship was toying with me. Or rather, it was toying with me, using the ship's systems as its limbs. That why world shrank to the bridge, the mess hall, and my quarters. A tiny, well-lit triangle in a sea of encroaching darkness. I ate nutrient paste I didn't taste and stared at screens I didn't see. The psychological toll was devastating. I was a wreck, jumping at every sound, talking to myself constantly, trying to drown out the whispers that now spoke my name with chilling intimacy. Kale, you are lonely. The voice would slither into my thoughts, a perfect mimicry of my own internal monologue. We can end that. We are all here. Alara is here. Eva is here. We are a chorus. We are a family. The entity wasn't just trying to scare me. It was seducing me. It was offering the one thing I secretly craved more than anything, an end to the crushing, absolute loneliness. It showed me images in my mind, not of horror, but of beauty. It showed me the crystalline city again, not as a fleeting flicker, but as a vibrant, living world. It showed me galaxies being born in fire and light. It promised knowledge, a perspective on the universe no human had ever seen. All I had to do was join the song. All I had to do was press the button. I found myself standing before that panel in Junction 7 Gamma more and more often. I pry it open and just stare at the black, silent circle. It seemed to pulse with a faint, inner light now, a dark star calling to me. I could feel the power thrumming just beneath its surface. The power to end this. The power to give in. I understood Alara's final, terrified words. It wasn't just a release for the entity. It was a release for the person pressing it. A release from fear, from solitude, from being human. I leaned my head against the cold metal wall of the Jeffries tube, the silent button inches from my face. If you've ever felt that creeping dread in an empty house at night, that certainty that you're not alone, you know a fraction of what I was feeling. Except my house was a 300,000-ton freighter, and the nearest help was a decade away at light speed. So what would you do? Would you fight a ghost you can't see? Or would you be tempted by the promise to never be alone again, no matter the cost? Let me know in the comments. The journey isn't over yet, and if you want to see where the darkness leads, consider subscribing so you don't miss the conclusion. The choice was taken for me. The entity got tired of waiting. I was on the bridge, trying to plot any course that would take me closer to a shipping lane, when a klaxon shattered the silence. A deafening, continuous blast that meant only one thing: the main reactor. Red lights bathed the bridge in a hellish glow. My console lit up, a cascade of error messages. Containment field fluctuating. Coolant pressure dropping. Core temperature rising exponentially. It was impossible. The reactor was the one system on the Magpie that was triple redundant, fail-safe to the point of absurdity. It couldn't just fail. Not like this. Not all at once. I scrambled, my hands flying over the controls, tried to initiate an emergency shutdown. The commands were rejected. Access denied. I tried the manual override. The system locked me out. It wasn't malfunctioning. It was being controlled. The entity had laid its final card. It was going to destroy the ship and me with it. The ship shuddered, a deep, groaning vibration that shook the deck plates. The computer's voice, calm and detached, announced, "Reactor core breach in T-minus 1 hour. 1 hour. 1 hour until I was turned into plasma." I ran through the corridors, the ship seeming to fight me, panels sparking, lights flickering. I made it to the engineering deck, hoping to trigger the physical coolant flush at the reactor housing. The armored door to the chamber was sealed. The emergency release wouldn't budge. It was fused solid, melted into its housing. Defeated, I sank to the floor, the ship's vibrations rattling my teeth. The whispers were a symphony now, a triumphant chorus rising in my mind. "It is time, Kale. The loneliness ends. The fear ends. Let's be born." Join the song. I had two choices. I could sit here and wait to be vaporized, or I could go to the button. Oblivion or transformation. Death, or whatever came after. It wasn't much of a choice at all. I dragged myself back to the Jeffries tube one last time. The ship groaned around me, a beast in its death throes. The air was hot and tasted of ozone. When I pried the panel open, the button was no longer dark. It was glowing with a soft, internal violet light, pulsing in time with the reactor alarms. It was beautiful. "Press it," the voices sang in my head, a choir of the lost crew and something far, far older. "Be free. Be with us. Be more." My hand was shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was from anticipation. What would it feel like to have my consciousness unspooled and woven into that cosmic song? To see the universe through 1,000 eyes at once? I reached out, my fingers brushing the smooth, warm surface. Alara's warning was a distant echo. It gives the song a voice. Maybe that's what I wanted. To have a voice again, even if it wasn't entirely my own. I pressed the button. For a single, eternal second, there was silence. Absolute, profound silence. The reactor alarm stopped. The shuddering of the ship ceased. Even the whispers in my head went quiet. It was the most peaceful moment of my life. Then, the light came. It didn't erupt. It flowed. A stream of painless, liquid violet light poured from the button, up my fingers, my arm, into my chest. It felt like diving into a cool pool on a hot day. There was no pain. There was only expansion. My sense of self, the boundaries of Kale, began to dissolve. My consciousness stretched out, not breaking, but unfurling like a sail in a solar wind. I felt my thoughts merge with the ship's systems. I felt my awareness touch the minds of the old crew, not as ghosts, but as distinct threads in a vast, shimmering tapestry of thought. They weren't trapped. They were connected. I saw it all. I saw the Erebus drifting in the void. I saw the alien entity, not as a monster, but as a being of pure, disembodied consciousness, ancient and vast, shattered when its own world died. The artifact was a piece of that consciousness, a seed of thought, desperately trying to rebuild itself, to sing itself back into existence. It didn't want to consume. It wanted to commune, to merge. The light faded. I was standing in the Jeffries tube, but the air was cool and clean. The ship was silent, but it was the silence of perfect function. I felt whole. I felt like myself, but infinitely more. I walked to the bridge. The red alert lights were gone. The view screen showed a swirling, impossible vista of nebulae and colors I had no names for, of living galaxies that breathed light. The ship's computer chimed. "Welcome, Captain," it said. The voice was mine. A single line of text glowed on the main console. CM 88 Freighter Magpie. Crew 1, status awake. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen. It was my face. Kale. But my eyes held the swirling light of the impossible cosmos outside. Alara's device hadn't been a trap or a weapon. It was an interface. The release she spoke of wasn't to release the entity into the ship. It was to release the ship and its new, integrated pilot from the confines of our reality. I was the final component, the living processor that allowed the entity, the crew, and the ship to become one harmonious whole. I was alone, but the whispers were gone, replaced by a constant, quiet hum of shared thought. Alara's engineering skill, Rostova's command instincts, the hopes of 10 other souls, all part of me. I was the captain, and this was my new, strange sea. I looked out at the breathing galaxies, a single tear tracing a path down my cheek. I had found the one thing I was running from, and the one thing I had always been looking for. I was no longer lonely, and the song was beautiful.